Christmas Eve at Henderson and Cole Financial was supposed to feel magical. The lobby glowed with soft golden lights. A giant tree stood near the entrance, wrapped in shimmering silver ribbons, and someone in HR kept playing a cheerful country version of Silent Night. But on the 28th floor, behind a glass conference room door, the atmosphere was anything but festive. Ethan Cole sat stiffly across from Victoria Hale, the company's sharp, polished CEO, whose calm voice rarely revealed anything she truly felt. Tonight was no different. She slid a termination folder toward him with the emotionless grace of someone signing off invoices. Ethan's pulse tightened. He wasn't a dramatic man. He had learned to stay steady for the sake of his daughter. But something about the cold finality in her tone made his chest ache. "There's evidence of falsified data on the Henderson account," Victoria said. "We can't keep you on." Ethan barely heard the rest. Words like risk exposure, liability, misconduct blurred together. His mind went straight to Mia, waiting in the hallway with her little pink winter coat, humming Christmas songs under her breath, probably expecting cookies afterward. She trusted him to keep their small world safe, to be her unshakable dad, even when life wasn't gentle with them. He forced himself to ask, "Can I at least explain?" Victoria cut him off softly but firmly. "The decision is final." And just like that, 12 years of hard work collapsed in a quiet room, scented with peppermint candles. When Ethan walked out, Mia pressed her hands and face against the frosted glass, her bright eyes full of innocent curiosity. "Daddy, are we going home now?" she whispered. He knelt down, steadying his shaky breath. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." He zipped up her coat, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The hallway felt unbearably bright, almost cruelly cheerful. As they stepped into the snowy evening, Ethan held her hand tighter than usual. Behind him, the building's warm lights shimmered like they belonged to another life, a life he no longer had. Christmas Eve was supposed to bring miracles, but tonight it delivered heartbreak instead. Snow drifted across the parking lot as Ethan buckled Mia into her booster seat. The night felt heavier than the winter air, thick, silent, almost hollow. He kept a steady smile for her sake, but inside something fragile was cracking. Losing a job was one thing. Losing it on Christmas Eve, with no warning and no chance to defend himself, hid in a place he didn't like to visit, the place where worry lived. As he started the car, Mia swung her legs gently, humming the same holiday tune she had been practicing for her school concert. Her innocence made the moment both tender and painfully bittersweet. "Daddy," she said softly, "are we still getting hot chocolate tonight?" He swallowed the tightness in his throat. "Of course we are, kiddo." Because no matter how bruised he felt, her joy came first. Driving home, Ethan glanced at the cardboard box of his things in the back seat. Family photos, Mia's crayon drawings, a faded mug he'd used for years. Each item felt like a quiet reminder of the life he'd built with steady, honest effort. A life that someone had tried to paint as dishonest. The truth was simple. Ethan knew he hadn't falsified anything, but proving innocence to people who wouldn't listen? That was a different mountain entirely. In the rearview mirror, Mia watched the snowfall with wide, wonder-filled eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "did something bad happen?" He hesitated just a beat before choosing the gentlest truth he could offer. "Sometimes grown-ups have tough days," he said, "but we're going to be okay. You and me, we always figure it out." Mia nodded, trusting him completely. And for the first time that night, Ethan wished he had even half of her faith. While Ethan drove home through the quiet, snowy streets, another man sat comfortably in a corner office overlooking the city. Graham Porter, the senior vice president, whose reputation was as polished as his expensive cufflinks. To most people, Graham seemed charming, confident, impossibly composed. But beneath that smooth exterior lived something far less admirable. A reckless, self-serving streak that had finally caught up to him. 2 months earlier, Graham had approved a string of high-risk investment moves, bold enough to make him look like a genius if they worked, catastrophic if they didn't. And they didn't. $40 million evaporated in a single brutal week. The consequences should have fallen squarely on him. But Graham wasn't the kind of man who accepted responsibility. He was the kind of man who looked for someone smaller, quieter, more vulnerable to bury under the rubble. Ethan Cole was perfect. A single dad who left at 5:30 every day. No powerful friends at the office, no one to fight for him. A man who worked hard, kept his head down, and never imagined someone would twist his honesty into a weapon. Graham had spent late nights fabricating log entries, backdating approval signatures, and shaping a narrative so convincing that even seasoned auditors wouldn't question it. He moved through each step with a cold, calculating precision, convinced he was untouchable. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, he sipped whiskey in his office, watching snow fall over the city lights. A smug, satisfied smile settled on his face as he pictured Ethan walking out of the building with a cardboard box. One loose end tied up, he murmured. But guilt, like winter, has a way of creeping in slowly, through cracks a man doesn't know he has. And Graham Porter had just set something in motion he would never be able to control. 3 weeks after the layoff, winter tightened its grip on Connecticut, the kind of raw, biting cold that seeps through gloves and makes every breath sting. On a lonely stretch of I-84, Victoria Hale's luxury sedan jerked, sputtered, and rolled to a stop on the shoulder, steam curling from under the hood. Her phone sat at 3% battery, no service, no passing cars, just the sharp wind and the growing realization that for once, she wasn't in control. She stepped out, shivering in a coat far too thin for this kind of cold. The highway felt eerily quiet, wide and unforgiving. For the first time in a long time, a flicker of uneasy vulnerability crept up her spine. Headlights appeared in the distance. A pickup truck slowed, hazard lights blinking amber through the snow. Victoria's pulse jumped. Strangers on dark highways rarely brought comfort. But when the driver stepped out, her breath caught for an entirely different reason. Ethan. He didn't recognize her at first. Dressed in jeans, boots, and a worn jacket, he looked different than the man she had fired with such clinical detachment. Steadier, warmer, more human than she ever allowed herself to see. "You all right?" he asked, voice steady, gentle. Not a trace of bitterness. My car just died," Victoria managed. "Pop the hood," he said, already grabbing a flashlight. "Let's take a look." As Ethan knelt in the snow, tightening cables with practiced ease, Mia rolled down the truck window, her breath fogging the glass. "That's my dad. He helps everybody," she announced proudly, "even when they're kind of mean." Victoria's heart twisted. Ethan didn't react. He just kept working, calm, patient, quietly compassionate, even toward the woman who had turned his life upside down. When he finally stood, snow dusting his hair and sleeves, he said, "You should be good to make it to a shop. Just drive easy." Victoria thanked him, but the words felt fragile, too small for the weight in her chest. As his truck pulled away, she stood alone on the icy shoulder, shaken, humbled, and suddenly unsure of everything she thought she knew. That night, after the highway encounter, Victoria sat alone in her upscale apartment overlooking the Hartford skyline. Normally, the view brought her a calm, almost smug satisfaction, the reward of years of discipline and hard work. But tonight, the city lights felt restless, almost accusatory. Her mind kept replaying the same image. Ethan kneeling in the snow, fixing her car with steady hands and gentle patience, as if she were any other stranded driver and not the woman who had shattered his career. She poured herself a glass of wine, hoping it would ease the knot in her chest. It didn't. The guilt was persistent, unsettling, pressing against her like a weight she couldn't shift. She opened her laptop, pulled up Ethan's HR file, and began reading it for the first time with something other than detached professionalism. His attendance record was spotless. Recommendations from previous managers were glowing. Community service notes, volunteering at food drives, coaching youth soccer, painted a picture of a man built on integrity. The more she read, the more her stomach twisted. None of it aligned with the narrative Graham Porter had insisted was clear-cut evidence. The contrast felt jarring, almost painfully obvious now that she bothered to look. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples as a slow, aching truth crept in. The truth she had been too busy, too prideful, and too emotionally guarded to question. Did I fire an innocent man? It was a question she wasn't ready to answer, yet it echoed in her mind with stubborn clarity. Across town, Ethan tucked Mia into bed, unaware that his world was beginning to shift again. This time not from betrayal, but from the first flickers of someone finally seeing him for who he truly was. And in her quiet apartment, Victoria realized something terrifying. For the first time in years, she felt remorse, and remorse demanded action. A few days later, on a chilly Saturday morning, Ethan and Mia stopped by a small family-owned coffee shop on Main Street. The place was warm and cozy, string lights hanging across the ceiling, the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting through the air, and the soft buzz of people easing into their weekend routines. It was one of the few spots that always made Ethan feel grounded. He had just ordered Mia her favorite powdered sugar donut when the bell over the door chimed. And in walked Victoria Hale. The moment she spotted them, her steps faltered. Something uneasy, almost vulnerable, flickered across her usually composed face. She looked nothing like the stone-cold executive he remembered, more like a woman carrying a weight she didn't know how to set down. Mia, of course, waved enthusiastically. "Hi, you're the lady from the road." Victoria managed a soft, awkward smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Ethan felt his shoulders tense. He wasn't angry, just cautious, guarded. He still didn't trust whatever she thought she needed from him. "I didn't expect to see you," Victoria said, her voice gentler than he'd ever heard it. "It's a small town," Ethan replied, keeping his tone neutral. Victoria hesitated, as if searching for words that wouldn't make things worse. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened." She swallowed, visibly uncomfortable. "I know I can't fix everything, but I want to try, if you'd let me." Ethan let out a slow breath, his expression unreadable. Her sincerity didn't erase the pain, but it wasn't nothing either. Before he could respond, Mia chimed in, bright, innocent, unfiltered. "Daddy makes the best pancakes in the world. You should try them sometime." Victoria laughed, quiet, soft-hearted, unexpectedly warm. And for a fleeting second, Ethan saw a person behind the title. Someone real, someone trying. Still, trust would take time. But this moment felt like the first small crack in a very tall wall. 2 weeks later, the city hosted its annual winter fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. A polished event filled with shiny name tags, clinking glasses, and people pretending they weren't checking donation levels on the screens. Victoria attended every year, presenting herself as the picture of calm, corporate generosity. But this year, her nerves felt raw, her confidence unsteady. She wasn't expecting to see Ethan there. Yet suddenly, in the swirl of donors and holiday decor, she spotted him, standing near the silent auction table with Mia, who wore a sparkly blue dress and mismatched hair clips. Before Ethan could stop her, Mia darted straight toward Victoria. "Hi," she chirped. "Do you remember me?" Victoria smiled, small and nervous. "Of course I do." Mia tilted her head, studying her with a seriousness far too big for her tiny frame. "My dad was sad for a long time after you talked to him at your work," she said. "But he told me grown-ups make mistakes. Did you make one?" The question hit Victoria like a punch to the chest. Clean, honest, impossible to dodge. Adults tiptoed around guilt. Children walked right through the front door. Victoria knelt to Mia's height, her expression achingly sincere. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I did." Mia blinked, thoughtful. "Did someone lie to you?" "'Cause at school, Emma thought I took her eraser, but it was actually Michael. She said sorry when she found out." Ethan rushed over, embarrassed. But the moment was already carved into the air. Pure, piercing truth between all three of them. Victoria swallowed hard, her voice low and humbled. "I'm trying to find out what really happened," she said, "and I want to make it right." Mia smiled brightly, as if that answered everything. Ethan didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened, if only an inch. A child's honesty had shaken the ground beneath them, and for the first time, Victoria felt the path toward redemption open just a little wider. That night, long after the fundraiser ended, Victoria returned to her office, heels in hand, hair pinned back, determination settling into her bones like winter frost. The building was nearly empty, lights dimmed, the hallways echoing with that hollow corporate silence only night can bring. For the first time in years, she wasn't there to meet with investors or review projections. She was there to confront something far more personal and far more terrifying. She unlocked the secure server room, the cold fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Her trusted IT specialist, Janet Russo, was already waiting, sipping lukewarm coffee with a look that mixed curiosity and concern. "Are you sure you want to do this off the record?" Janet asked. Victoria nodded. "I need answers, real ones." What followed was 3 hours of gritty, methodical, borderline forensic digging. Lost server logs were resurrected. Deleted emails were pieced together from backup archives Graham never expected anyone to check. Time-stamped trails were traced against building access records. And slowly, painfully, the truth began to take shape. Files attributed to Ethan had been accessed on nights he wasn't even in the building. Approvals supposedly signed by him didn't match his handwriting or digital signature. Risk reports had been edited from Graham's account, though he'd attempted to mask it with layers of misleading metadata. Victoria felt each revelation like a cold hand closing around her ribs. This wasn't negligence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, calculated betrayal, one she had blindly accepted. By 3 a.m., she stood surrounded by printouts and recovered files, her heart pounding with a mix of rage, disgust, and self-reproach. She rubbed her temples, feeling her composure fracture. For months, she had trusted Graham. For months, an innocent man had carried the consequences. And now, staring at the undeniable evidence, Victoria knew the next step wouldn't just be uncomfortable. It would change everything. The next afternoon, Victoria walked into Graham Porter's corner office, armed with a folder so thick it could break a career, because it was about to. The winter sun cut sharp lines across the room, illuminating Graham's confident, almost smug posture as he leaned back in his leather chair. He didn't stand when she entered. That alone told her everything she needed to know about the man he believed he was. "Victoria," he drawled, "to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Her voice was icy, steady in a way that made Graham's smile twitch. "We need to talk. About Ethan Cole, and about the Henderson losses." Graham's expression froze for half a second, barely noticeable unless someone was looking for cracks. Victoria was. She placed the folder on his desk and opened it. Recovered logs, reconstructed emails, matching timestamps. Dozens of pages of undeniable, meticulously documented fraud. Graham's face shifted, from polite curiosity to caution to thinly veiled panic. "This can be explained," he said, but his voice had lost its smoothness, now edged with something rattled and brittle. Victoria's tone remained calm, but each word landed with the precision of a hammer. "You fabricated evidence. You framed an innocent man. And you risked millions of company dollars to cover your own reckless decisions." Graham stood abruptly, anger flushing through him. "Be careful, Victoria. If you do this—" "It's already done," she cut in. "Legal has the files. The board is meeting in 1 hour, and federal regulators were notified this morning." For the first time in their decade of working together, Graham looked cornered, stripped of his polished arrogance. "You're destroying your own company," he spat. "You're destroying yourself." "No," Victoria replied, her voice low, resolute. "I'm cleaning up yours." Security arrived moments later. As they escorted Graham out, he glared at her with venomous, impotent fury. But Victoria didn't flinch. She finally understood what integrity required, and she knew exactly who she needed to face next. Ethan. 2 days after Graham's arrest, the auditorium at Henderson and Cole Financial filled with employees, reporters, cameras, and an uneasy buzz that rippled through the air. It wasn't every day a Fortune 500 CEO called an emergency press conference. And certainly not for this. Victoria Hale stood at the podium, the bright lights making her feel strangely exposed, her hands resting lightly on the edges as if steadying herself. This wasn't the confident executive who commanded boardrooms. This was a woman preparing to face her own failure publicly. When she looked out across the crowd, her eyes landed on Ethan, seated in the back row with Mia perched on his lap. The little girl waved. Ethan didn't, but his gaze held something quieter. Curiosity, caution, maybe even hope. Victoria took a breath. "Over the past several weeks," she began, voice steady but undeniably humble, "serious misconduct was uncovered within our company. Evidence was falsified. Logs were altered. And as a result, an innocent employee, Ethan Cole, was wrongfully terminated." A murmur moved through the room. She continued, her tone deepening with sincere remorse. "I made the decision to fire him. I trusted the wrong person, failed to ask the right questions, and because of that, a good man and his daughter suffered. For that, I offer my full, unconditional apology." Ethan's jaw tightened, emotion flickering behind his calm expression. Victoria stepped aside from the microphone for a moment, gathering her courage. "To ensure accountability, the individual responsible has been arrested and charged, and today I'm announcing Ethan's full reinstatement, with back pay, extended benefits, and the freedom to choose any role he believes aligns with his skills and values." Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled, but Victoria saw only Ethan, his breath catching, his eyes softening just slightly. Then she added quietly but powerfully, I cannot undo the past, but I am committed to making things right. Across the room, Mia leaned toward her dad and whispered, Daddy, I think she means it. Ethan exhaled a long, heavy breath. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, something inside him began to heal. The following Monday, Ethan Cole walked through the glass doors of Henderson and Cole Financial, not as a defeated man returning to the scene of his humiliation, but as someone stepping into a renewed, deliberately chosen chapter of his life. His badge felt different in his hand, lighter somehow, as if carrying possibility instead of shame. Victoria had given him full freedom to choose a new role. Ethan didn't want a promotion or a shiny title. He wanted purpose. So he proposed creating a new department, employee advocacy and whistleblower protection, a place where integrity actually meant something, a place where what happened to him would never happen to anyone else. The board approved it unanimously. His new office wasn't luxurious, but it felt grounded and honest, just like him. The nameplate on his door read, Director, Employee Advocacy, a title he'd chosen carefully to sound approachable, not intimidating. Employees passed by offering shy smiles, some apologetic, some supportive. Ethan responded with quiet grace. He wasn't here for validation. He was here to rebuild, to help. Meanwhile, Victoria found reasons to stop by his floor more often than necessary, sometimes to discuss policy, sometimes just to ask about Mia's soccer games. Sometimes, Ethan suspected, because she was learning how to be someone different too. Someone earnest, someone vulnerable, someone who cared. And Mia adored her. She insisted on giving Victoria a hand-painted picture of a yellow house. Because yellow is a happy color, she explained. Victoria hung it in her office beside her MBA diploma, surprising even herself. Small moments, coffee in the break room, shared elevator rides, brief conversations lingering a little longer each day, began stitching an unexpected connection between Ethan and Victoria. Cautious, uncertain, but undeniably hopeful. For the first time in months, Ethan felt his life wasn't just recovering, it was transforming. Autumn settled over Connecticut with the kind of crisp, golden calm that makes the world feel freshly washed. Leaves drifted across sidewalks, families carved pumpkins, and the air smelled like cinnamon, wood smoke, and new beginnings. For Ethan, life had found a new rhythm, steady, meaningful, and strangely hopeful. He spent his mornings running the employee advocacy department, guiding the company towards something more honest, more human. In the afternoons, he coached Mia's soccer team, cheering louder than any other parent on the field. His life felt fuller now, stronger, somehow more radiant after surviving something so dark. And then there was Victoria. Their conversations grew longer, no longer strictly professional, no longer shaky with guilt. A quiet ease had blossomed between them. She was learning to be softer, more open. He was learning to let his guard down around her. They were two people shaped by mistakes and resilience, two people finding comfort in each other's presence. It all came to a turning point on the night of Mia's 8th birthday. The house was still buzzing with leftover laughter, balloons sagging toward the floor, frosting smudged on the counter. Mia had gone to bed exhausted and happy, leaving Ethan and Victoria alone in the warm, messy kitchen. The glow from the string lights made the whole room feel tender and intimate, as if inviting them to say the things neither had dared to yet. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a cautious smile tugging at his lips. "Did you have fun?" he asked. Victoria laughed softly. "I haven't been to a kid's birthday party in maybe 20 years. She stepped closer, her voice turning gentle, vulnerable. "Thank you for letting me be here." "You earned your spot," Ethan said. "You've changed, I see it." The words struck something in her, something aching, something healing. She looked up at him, eyes reflecting the string lights. "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to be better than I was." He didn't respond with words. He stepped forward and kissed her. Slow, thoughtful, heartfelt. A kiss that wasn't rushed or unsure, but steady. A kiss that felt like a door finally opening. Victoria smiled against his lips. "So, this is happening?" "Yeah," he whispered. "Feels like it is." From the hallway, Mia's small voice called out sleepily, "Are you guys done being mushy? 'Cause I want another cupcake tomorrow." They laughed, warm, unguarded laughter that filled the house. the kind that only comes from a place of true safety. Outside, the autumn wind rustled the leaves. Inside, a new kind of family was forming. Not perfect, not without scars, but beautiful, hopeful, and built on truth. A life restored, a heart repaired, a future rewritten. If you were in Ethan's shoes, could you forgive someone who made such a painful mistake? If they truly tried to make things right? And would you give them a second chance? If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances again, don't forget to hit subscribe. I share more heartfelt, uplifting stories every week, and I'd love to have you here for the next one.